There's a famous short story by an Irish writer named Bob Shaw called Light of Other Days. An unhappily married couple are driving through the countryside when they spot a sign ahead.
Slow glass, quality high, prices low. J.R. Hagen.
J.R. Hagen was a glass farmer. You just have to go with it. It's a story. He said his glass was 10 years thick and in perfect phase. And here's what that meant. It meant it took 10 years for light to pass through it. Hagen's slow glass allowed a person to enjoy the view from a decade earlier. Most people bought these special windows so they could enjoy nature. The slow glass windows got the nickname scendos. People would park them in front of some spectacular natural scenery for a year or so, then install them in their dim urban apartments. Scenes of dirty skylines or brick walls were replaced with waterfalls and woodlands, that sort of thing. Or you could do what Hagen, the glass farmer, did. What his slow glass revealed was a woman and a child moving through the living room of his tiny cottage. The story ends with the farmer gruffly trying to explain.
It wasn't my fault. A hit-and-run driver got them both down on the Oban Road 6 years ago. My boy was only 7 when it happened. I'm entitled to keep something.
A total punch in the gut. The kind only the best made-up stories can deliver. But what if something like slow glass was real? What if there was a way not to travel to the past, but to watch it unfold? And what if this amazing technology, an invention so unlikely that it borders on the miraculous, is quietly collecting dust in the secret archives at the Vatican?
Make out a small beam of light against the mirror.
0, 1. Truly weird stuff.
Time travel. If only, right? Show me some random social post or online story about a person who claims to be visiting from the future, and I am there, even though I know how borderline impossible real-time travel would be. I say borderline because according to Einstein's theory of relativity, time travel is possible in theory. Now, that theory holds up a little bit better when you're talking about traveling to the future. That's because of something called time dilation. Time slows down for objects moving at very high speeds. Please don't ask me why, because then I'll try really hard to understand the science and explain it, and we're just both going to end up with crossed eyes and a headache and a whole chunk of our lives that we can never get back. We just have to accept that if we're ever going to travel through time, we'll probably be traveling only to the future. So what makes even a theory of traveling to the past so difficult? Well, according to Einstein's general relativity, there are these things called closed time-like curves that basically function as paths to the past. But without something wildly exotic like a wormhole, there's no way to get onto that path. But let's say you do manage to grab hold of a wormhole, which is really just a kind of tunnel through space-time. Could you travel back in time that way? Maybe, but wormholes are still strictly a theory. It's just that wormholes are such a beloved trope in science fiction that they feel like a fact. The physicist Stephen Hawking thought that maybe nature made traveling to the past impossible in order to protect reality itself, which feels surprisingly woo-woo for Stephen Hawking. But then we don't really know what the hell reality even is. So why not make nature the bodyguard? The issue with traveling backward in time is the enormous risk of creating world-annihilating paradoxes. Once you accept that, you understand that the only safe way to travel to the past is as an observer, able to witness, but unable to interact or influence, like being inside a 3D movie. So here we humans are, stuck in the present moment, And even that's forever sliding away from us. We're slaves and hostages and prisoners of time. No wonder we dream of being able to control it and dominate it, to hopscotch across it like explorers or tourists, spying on the dinosaurs, watching the great pyramids being built, eyeballing Billy the Kid. The past would be the ultimate theme park if we could only get there. Now, if Vatican priest Father Pellegrino Ernetti was telling the truth, he can, in a way. Two things to know right off the top. One, Father Ernetti was a Benedictine monk and a trained exorcist. He was also a musicologist and a physicist. That last part is important because it lends credibility to his story. It's not unreasonable to expect that any legit inventor of any kind of time travel device would have a background in science, right? And aren't physicists the most magical scientists of all? Second, there is an extensive underground vault at the Vatican in Rome. Nearly 53 miles worth of shelves. A vast collection of historical documents, manuscripts, letters, books, all accumulated over centuries. Its official name is the Vatican Apostolic Archives. Access is extremely restricted. No tours are permitted for the general public. Preservation is the stated reason, and even a suspicious kook like me can't really argue with that. But you know what happens when the powerful declare something off limits? Curiosity has a way of metastasizing into conspiracy. Some believe that tucked away in those 53 miles of files is proof that Jesus Christ had a wife and children. Proof of extraterrestrial visitation and manipulation of the human species. Proof of links between the mafia and the Vatican Bank. Proof that the church collaborated with the Nazi Party. And prophecy after prophecy of worldwide catastrophe and doom. There's something else down there too, according to Father Pellegrino Ernetti. And he would know because he invented it. He called it the Chronovisor. And with it, you could watch the past just like watching TV. Not all that long ago, people were pretty open-minded about stuff like time travel. That's because a great many of the technological advances we've made as a species of meaty little talking monkeys have happened recently, and from history's perspective, all at once. Let's break it down. We first beamed a radio signal across the Atlantic in 1901. 20 years later, we developed the first jet engine. In 1938, we discovered nuclear fission. 15 years later, we discovered DNA. In 1969, the first human walked on the moon. 20 years later, we invented the World Wide Web. And so on. It's very impressive stuff. But it's all pretty new when you think about it. Now go back to 1931, the year the electric guitar was invented. A new product called Alka-Seltzer appeared on drugstore shelves, and the ballpoint pen was introduced to the world. It's July 17th, and you open the morning newspaper.
Explosion of a powerful bomb in the Vatican gardens terrified residents of Vatican City. Windows of several buildings were smashed, but no one was hurt. Time machine found in St. Peter's Cathedral and removed to a safe place.
Oh, well, that's too bad. Good thing they were able to save the time machine, though. Wait, what? Was that just a casual mention of a time machine at the Vatican? Exactly. Just a casual mention of a time machine at the Vatican. Because in 1931, that idea didn't strike people as ludicrous. Not at all. Pellegrino Ernetti was born in Rome in 1925. He's just a little guy, not even 6 years old when that explosion happened at the Vatican. Ernetti was called to religious life early, entering a Benedictine abbey in Venice at age 16. In 1949, he was ordained as a priest. Now, for more than 1,500 years, the monks and nuns of St. Benedict have used music as a form of worship, song as prayer. You know it as Gregorian chant. Father Ernetti became a musicologist and an expert in Gregorian chant. He produced recordings, he published books, and gave lectures, and eventually it all led him to Agostino Gemelli, the founder of the Catholic University of Milan. Gemelli was also a holy man and a scientist. The two collaborated on research into the acoustic properties of music. Their workplace was the physics lab with all its wonders, oscilloscopes and machines built for filtering frequencies and every kind of electronics that was state-of-the-art in the early 1950s. This is where Father Ernetti fell in love with physics and all the possibilities of harnessing the unseen forces that make up the world. And it was here that Ernetti and Gemelli had an experience that convinced them that they had tapped into something profound. Those unseen forces? For most of human history, it was believed that the universe was filled with a mysterious substance called ether. This idea arose from the fact that folks simply could not accept the idea of empty space, of an endless void of nothing. Without ether, they argued, how could there be gravity? How could the photons of sunlight travel without some material to carry them along? Go ahead and make fun of the etherists, but now we know that they weren't all that far off the mark. Because contemporary astrophysicists know that there's something deeply weird about the universe. For starters, there just isn't enough detectable matter out there to account for galaxies and gravity and everything else. As in, we've only been able to identify about 16% of all the matter that should exist. Until July 2025, when physicists at Caltech announced that they'd found all that missing matter, illuminating its hiding spots using something called fast radio bursts. It turns out that about 76% of all that missing matter can be found in the space between galaxies. Mystery solved. If we were a peaceful planet focused on progress and prosperity, this would have been huge news. But since we're none of those things, our big news in July 2025 was that the viral Labubu doll trend had finally peaked. So, what's the connection between the matter in the universe and a time machine? Well, have you ever heard of the Akashic Record? It all begins with Madame Blavatsky and the founding of the religion of Theosophy. That's a story all by itself. Blavatsky and her fellow Theosophists believed in a non-physical plane of existence called the mental plane. Stored there is a digest or collection of every single word, deed, thought, intention, and emotion that has ever occurred to any human being or other entity or life form at any time ever, past, present, and future. This compendium is called the Akashic Record, and the ether is how it's accessed.
It was believed that man, totally in touch with the etheric substance within himself, once flew like a bird through the ether of the universe. It was believed that he had once known how to pull the energies of the conscious, thinking stars and planets down through the ether to the earth for his own purposes. Might we soon discover that the Akashic records exist as well, and that we can fly through the ether like birds to once again access them?
If you could get into the Akashic records, you could observe any and every moment in human history. Father Ernetti believed that was possible, and so he set out to build a machine. A Benedictine monk turned priest who studies Gregorian chant doesn't just wake up one day with the wild notion to build a time machine. For Ernetti, the fateful moment came on September 15, 1952. He was in the physics lab at the Catholic University of Milan with his colleague, Father Gemelli. The men were filtering harmonics out of a Gregorian chant, but a wire on the tape recorder kept breaking. From Peter Crass's book about Ernetti?
Exasperated, Father Gemelli looked up and asked his father for help.
It was a habit Gemelli had, asking his long-dead father to lend a hand in a crisis, a comforting little ritual, and a plea that had never once been answered. It's a thing a lot of us do, isn't it?
To the two men's amazement, his father's voice replied, "Of course I shall help you. I am always with you."
That was unexpected, to say the least, and Gemelli broke out in a sweat. The man feared that this might be the devil's trickery. Father Ernetti, ever the scientist, was more curious than afraid. "Calm down," he told Gemelli. "Calm down. We must try this experiment again."
They did. This time, a very clear voice filled with humor said, "But Zucchini, it is clear. Don't you know it is I?"
Zucchini was Gemelli's long-ago childhood nickname. No one had called him by that in decades. The priest was deeply unsettled. As thrilled as he was to hear his late father's voice, how was it possible? What right did he have to communicate with the dead? And all of it was captured by the tape recorder. Gemelli was so upset by the incident that he took himself and Ernetti off to the Vatican to meet with Pope Pius XII, who was pretty excited about it, honestly. Gemelli was afraid that he'd tampered with the mysteries of the universe, but the Pope was all, "This discovery could help strengthen people's faith, not challenge it," which should have reassured the priest, but it didn't. Gemelli never wanted to discuss the experiment after that. He was so very private about it. But Ernetti, it was all he could think about. It made him wonder about the harmonics they had filtered out. Where did that sound go? Was it simply annihilated? Or did it become part of the swirling ether that fills the universe? Then came the chance encounter. That's the reason that we know any of this at all. A French theologian named Francois Bruno was visiting Venice in the early 1960s, touring the Basilica and Abbey of San Giorgio Maggiore, when he met a stranger. It was a completely random encounter, Bruno later said. A conversation with an odd but most compelling man, a priest by the name of Father Pellegrino Ernetti. The two men were waiting at the pier for one of Venice's famous water taxis when they got to chatting. They had a surprising amount in common. Both were priests and both had studied numerous ancient languages. Hearing this, Father Bruno unloaded one of his greatest frustrations regarding scripture and theology.
His annoyance at those new interpretations of Scripture that see them as more than just a collection of symbols with no relation to the real facts, including even those of the life of Christ.
It was Ernetti's response that left Bruno confused and intrigued. Ernetti told the French priest that there was a machine, a very mysterious device, that could certainly silence those voices. What? That didn't make a whole lot of sense to Bruno. What could a machine have to do with how scholars interpreted the Word of God? When Ernetti invited Bruno to pop by for a deeper chat, the man couldn't accept fast enough. What Ernetti subsequently revealed seemed too fantastic to be true. But why, thought Bruno, would the priest lie? Bruno listened as Ernetti described the recording in the lab in Milan, capturing the voice of Father Gemelli's dead father. Ernetti said that he'd sought out other physicists regarding this and that many shared his enthusiasm. Ernetti had put together a team of scientists, he told Bruno, and he swore them to secrecy. Their goal was extraordinary and sounded insane.
To build a machine that could penetrate back into the mists of time and recapture the sights and sounds of mankind's past.
This is what Ernetti meant by silencing the voices. There'd be no need to interpret the events described in the Bible. if you could actually see it all unfold for yourself. Father Ernetti was reticent when it came to naming his collaborators on the creation of the device. Physicists from Portugal and Japan were involved, he said, along with the Nobel Prize-winning architect of the Manhattan Project, Enrico Fermi, and German rocket scientist Werner von Braun. As unlikely as a time machine is, we can all agree that if anyone could figure out how to build one, probably be those guys. That's kind of what Bruna thought too, even as he questioned the feasibility of such a thing. But then he reminded himself that this was the 1960s. Physicists had figured out both the atomic and the hydrogen bomb. NASA was working on sending a man to the moon, and the movie The Time Machine was selling out theaters.
Why is it that we usually ignore the fourth dimension? You see, we can move in the other three. As the doctor said, up, down, forwards, backwards, sideways. But when it comes to time, we are prisoners.
Inventor Rod Taylor's breakthrough into the realm of the fourth dimension is defied by his friend Alan Young.
If that machine can do what you say it can, destroy it, George, before it destroys you.
Every moment is a year, hurtling through the atomic wars of the future on an incredible excursion into the unknown. What are the people like? Ah, the shape of things to come. It's lovely Yvette Mimieux. And what happens when boy meets girl thousands of years hence?
How do they wear their hair?
Who?
The women of your time.
Up like that?
Show me.
You'll be amazed to learn, by the way, that the people of the future appear to be mostly blonde ladies in tight skirts. Anywho, the more Ernetti talked, the more fascinated Bruna was. Ernetti allowed as to how they'd gotten lucky, almost accidentally stumbling onto their invention. He told Bruna that they could set the device to any time or place and see events unfolding with perfect clarity. To test it, they knew they'd need to find an historical event with enough modern evidence to support whatever the machine revealed. So they tuned in, Ernetti said, to a speech being given by the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Given how much Mussolini had been filmed and photographed, Ernetti said they had no doubt that their device had taken them back in time to see the man for themselves. The science that Ernetti was describing was legit. His device was based on the principle of energy conservation, which has nothing to do with turning down the thermostat at the house. The principle of energy conservation is this: energy can't be destroyed, only transformed. Sound waves, visual waves, once created, remain eternal. Think of those waves as being dispersed all through space. If we only had a way to detect them and then replay them. Do you see? Asked Father Ernetti. Any moment in history is yours to witness. From the assassination of Julius Caesar to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And you've done this? Pressed Bruna. We've done this, insisted Ernetti. But how? So according to an interview with Father Ernetti, published in 1972 in the Italian magazine La Domenica del Corriere, the team devised a series of antennas which were made of an alloy of 3 exotic metals. This antenna array scooped up the dispersed waves of light and sound energy that had been created by the targeted historical event. Since this sounds like nonsense, we should probably add that Ernetti and his team were operating off principles very familiar to astronomers, calculating light years, that sort of thing. Though, how even the most complex math could help locate the needle of, like, Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo in the haystack of energy rippling through space? How could that even be possible? Yet Ernetti insisted that not only was it possible, it had already been accomplished. Once the correct energy waves were located, Ernetti's team used a system of electronic oscillography to convert that energy back to sound and light. The antennas then delivered the reconstructed energy waves to a cathode ray tube where it was presented for viewing. And presto, human history as must-see TV. They named their machine Chronovisor. Ernetti told Bruna that with the Chronovisor, he had watched Roman senator and philosopher Cicero give an address to the Senate in the year 63 BC. What struck Ernetti most forcefully was the slight differences in the way Cicero pronounced certain Latin words, changes and vowel sounds from how Latin was currently being taught in schools. That's a compelling little anecdote, given our knowledge of how language evolves. You'd expect some differences, and either Ernetti understood that and added it to his tale for a dash of authenticity, or he was telling the truth. And then there was this. Ernetti described dialing the Chronovisor to the year 169 BC. Just a little side trip for fun, to watch a play, a tragedy written by the great poet Quintus Ennius. The play was called Thyestes, and almost all of the text has been lost to history. But Father Ernetti told Bruna,
"We heard and saw everything. Text, choruses, music. I've been able to publish the entire text of that tragedy."
It was persuasive. But what Father Bruna really wanted to know was this. Had Ernetti succeeded in using the Chronovisor to view the life of Jesus Christ?
At first, we tried to recapture the images of the day of Christ's crucifixion, but we had a problem. Crucifixions, as awful as they were commonplace in Christ's time. People were nailed to the cross every day. It didn't help that Christ wore a crown of thorns because, contrary to popular belief, it wasn't unusual to be punished by having a crown of thorns put on your head.
And so the Chronovisor team tried another strategy. Over the course of 3 days in January 1956, they perched in front of the machine to watch the Last Supper.
We saw everything. The agony in the garden, the betrayal of Judas, the trial. We saw the climb up Mount Calvary, all the stations of the cross.
Ernetti told Bruna that the true story of that wretched day had been distorted by the Church of the Middle Ages.
Christ never fell. He did not carry the whole cross by himself. That would have been far too heavy. He carried only the horizontal crossbeam attached to his shoulders. His feet were tied to the feet of the two there condemned men who were crucified with him.
Ernetti pointed out another way the truth had been shaped to fit the sensibilities of the medieval church. The story of Simon of Cyrene.
Christ had been greatly disfigured. The scourging had torn pieces of his skin off. You could see right through to the bone. But according to Roman law, the condemned prisoner had to arrive at the place of execution still alive.
Ernetti said that he'd been taught in seminary to follow the example of Simon of Cyrene and help Christ to carry the cross, just like Simon, who abandoned himself to that service. Except Simon hadn't volunteered, said Ernetti. He was forced to do it by the Roman soldiers who yanked Simon forcibly from the crowd. Then Ernetti revealed another astonishing moment shown by the Chronovisor.
The Chronovisor team was able to overhear some of Christ's words that are not preserved in the Gospels. At one point, Christ said, "This hour is yours."
Bruna's next question was the same one that maybe we all want answered. Did Ernetti witness the resurrection? Yes, the priest answered. But it was strange, in silhouette almost, not like a movie exactly, and not in color. And though the Chronovisor was not primarily built to record what it captured, the team did film that entire event. They then showed that film to Pope Pius XII, a handful of government officials, and members of the Pontifical Academy. It's an absolutely fantastical story, isn't it? Hard to believe on every level. And yet, here was a deeply devout and educated man of God insisting that it was true. So where is this Chronovisor now, Bruna asked. Ernetti told Bruna that after showing the film of Christ to the Pope, it was decided that the Chronovisor was simply too dangerous to even exist. It must be hidden. No, was Bruna's response. Why? Why conceal an invention with the power to restore faith to a broken world?
This machine can tune in on everyone's past completely, leaving nothing out. With it, there can be no more secrets, no more state secrets, no more industrial secrets, no more private lives.
Can you imagine what law enforcement and the courts could do with this, just for starters? Father Ernetti could.
Yes, the Chronovisor would turn the world topsy-turvy. The door would be wide open for the most fearsome dictatorship the world has ever seen. We ended up agreeing to dismantle our machine.
Bruna was flabbergasted, dumbfounded, overwhelmed, and a believer, due mostly to Father Ernetti himself. Too much a man of God, too good a man, and a respected scientist. It seemed to Bruna that Ernetti could only be telling the truth. It didn't hurt that Ernetti's description of how the Chronovisor worked fit neatly into both Eastern theories of the Akashic Record and Western spiritualism. And remember, this was happening at a time when the smartphone in your pocket would have seemed like an artifact from another planet or some super top secret government lab. I mean, the first TV broadcast in color had only just happened a few years earlier in 1954. As wild a tale as the story of the Chronovisor was, it seemed plausible enough. And the fact that it disappeared into the Vatican archives, there could be no better fortress, no hiding place more remote or inaccessible than that. A photograph accompanied that 1972 article in the magazine La Domenica della Corriere. A little blurry, it was a close-up of a man's face, eyes raised upward, mouth closed. It was allegedly a photo of Christ dying on the cross. You can imagine how sensational this was when it hit the streets. In August of that same year, the editors of a publication called Giornale dei Misteri, the Journal of Mysteries. That's fun to say, isn't it? Let's do it again. Giornale dei Misteri, the Journal of Mysteries. They received a letter from a man named Alfonso da Silva. And there was a photo tucked in that envelope as well. They were shocked to see the very same photo that had just been printed in La Domenica della Corriere, the photo allegedly of Christ on the cross. Except this photograph was that same image in reverse. Da Silva wrote that he bought this photo in a gift shop at a place called the Sanctuary of Merciful Love near the Italian city of Perugia. He said that it was a picture of one of the sanctuary's many wood carvings, this particular one by a Spanish artist. When the editors compared Da Silva's photo with the one printed in the magazine, they found them to be identical. The October 1972 edition of the Giornale dei Misteri featured the two photos side by side. No one argued that they weren't the same. The world itself may not have been rocked by this, but the world of parapsychology sure was. Devout Catholics paying attention to the story were also pretty sideways, since the hoax, if that's in fact what it was, had been perpetrated by a priest. And why? What could provoke a man of the cloth to unleash such a diabolical falsehood on the world? That'd be the devil. Who else? The controversy that raged in the worlds of both religion and the paranormal raged for 2 decades without Father Ernetti making public comment. Father Bruna, a true believer, defended Ernetti over and over, and he offered a theory to explain Ernetti's 20 years of puzzling silence regarding the Chronovisor. Bruna pointed out that the Vatican hadn't been a fan of how outspoken Ernetti had been about the device.
When a Benedictine monk makes revelations of such a magnitude, he very often needs the direct authorization of the Vatican.
This, said Bruna, accounted for why Ernetti would commit to speak and then fail to show, why he'd been so reticent to answer questions from the press and public, because any answer he gave would only spark more questions, and the priest had been forbidden to speak. Any answer he could offer would have to be evasive. But of course, his evasion and his silence would be interpreted as protecting the lie that was the Chronovisor. That Ernetti's story would be discredited as a result? Exactly what the Vatican wanted to happen. Ernetti had already drawn the attention of the American and Russian intelligence communities. Bruna said that Ernetti had been stalked by spies from both countries to the point where he was unable to leave his monastery without a pair of bodyguards. The sooner the world thought the priest was crazy or a liar, the better. On November 1st, 1993, Bruna and Ernetti sat down again for a conversation. Bruna wanted Ernetti to know that he'd written a book, and in it was a long section devoted to the pair's first meeting all those years ago in Venice. Father Ernetti approved, but asked that if the book was ever published in Italian, he would like to be permitted to add a few pages of his own. Then he had one last revelation for Bruna. Ernetti told Bruna that he'd attended a meeting at the Vatican just a month or so earlier, September 30th, 1993. He'd been summoned along with two other members of the Chronovisor team to give a presentation on the device.
We told them everything.
Bruna said those were the last words he ever heard his old friend speak. Father Ernetti died a few months later in Venice on April 8th, 1994. It was a great irony that Ernetti's skeptics and debunkers accused the priest of having fallen prey to a trick of Satan. Why ironic? Because, remember, Father Pellegrino Ernetti was also a trained exorcist. The man even wrote a book on the subject called Satan's Catechism, a sort of manual for spotting and dealing with demonic activity. The exorcism part of his resume is a little detail that's easy to lose track of when we're talking about a machine that lets you watch the past like it's Netflix. But Ernetti was apparently very enthusiastic when it came to casting out the devil. A bit too enthusiastic to suit his more conservative Benedictine brothers. Some whispered that Ernetti had a bad habit of confusing medical maladies with demonic possession. Ernetti wouldn't hear it.
Ernetti wasn't sure that the medical profession itself was entirely free of contagion from the dark forces. He even went so far as to suggest that the coldness emanating from some of them regarding his exorcisms was similar to the coldness he often felt emanating from Satan in the course of his exorcisms.
Oh, touche, Father Ernetti. Well done. And besides, the Vatican, for whatever unknown, unknowable, inscrutable strategic reason of its own, never discouraged Ernetti's demon hunting. A thing he believed in so passionately that even on his deathbed, he tried to get up to perform one final exorcism. Did he confess on that deathbed to having made up the story of the Chronovisor? Some say he did. They say he confessed to the lie, but his reasons were not to deceive. He lied, he said, because he was so hopeful that the Chronovisor would work. If that's true, then the implication is the Chronovisor actually really did exist. It just didn't work, which is a wild idea all by itself. An Italian priest, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and a German rocket scientist walk into a laboratory. It sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, doesn't it? One where the punchline goes, and Jesus was in the gift shop all along. What does it say about us humans that a man of faith was so desperate to build a machine that could supply the one thing faith is supposed to exist without? Proof. We wanted proof. A lot of us want that. And the kind of proof Ernetti was chasing just doesn't exist. unless it does. And the Vatican has it hidden away, tucked into a lockbox, getting all kinds of dusty and forgotten on one of those 53 miles worth of shelves that none of us will ever, ever, ever see. Next time on True Weird Stuff. Did you used to love square dancing in gym class at school? I did. I know I'm in the minority. I know a lot of kids hated it. Why is it you never wondered why you were square dancing in school? Why it was a part of phys ed programs all across the country? And I bet you also didn't know that the reason we square dance at school has a whole lot to do with the guy who invented the 5-day work week and the assembly line, Mr. Henry Ford. That's on the next True Weird Stuff.
Special thanks to our voice talents on this episode, Carrie, Doc Bowser, and Don Morgan. You and I both were raised Catholic and went to Catholic school, and we know that there's a lot of mystery that is around the Catholic religion. I know that the Vatican has advisors who are priests who are like astrophysicists. Not every priest is a parish priest. Some of them are scientists and all kinds of schools of thought. And so I do know that it's not too far-fetched to think that the Vatican is somehow involved with science.
Oh, they are. Yeah, there's no question.
I mean,
look at the Jesuits. I mean, that entire order is about the intellect.
Right. It is. So that part of it, but the idea that somehow we were able, and I thought you did a really great job with two things. One was sort of explaining how this is possible. Now, whether it happened or not, we don't know, but how this is possible. And the other is the great pronunciations on all the Italian newspapers and magazines.
La Domenica del Corriere. The number of times I love Giornali dei Mestieri, but the La Domenica del Corriere. Yeah, you can't help. You're like, you're doing that thing with your hands when you say it.
Doesn't it surprise you that so cavalierly this was mentioned in the? Yeah, there was this thing, but the time machine's okay. In the explosion, I guess it was 1931 that the explosion happened.
1931.
So
Max. The way that the people of Earth just accepted that the Vatican had a time machine, I could not find a single human being in the public space going, "Hey, what's up with that?" Like, we just accepted it. Oh yeah,
right.
The Vatican's got a time machine.
But go ahead.
I'm not kidding in any way when I say to you, so many of our technological advances are happening just now, all at once, like a minute ago. Mm-hmm. We were not people in 1931. Listen, we hadn't discovered DNA. We barely were working with TV and radio, and radio and TV was in its infancy, and not even like people didn't even know what it was. We didn't have most of what we have now, and even the like limited understanding of these complex things that we have now. I'll say this: I like on the one hand, I have no idea how you actually could locate those particular energy waves. I know you could translate them using, I know you can take a sound wave and turn it into a light wave and vice versa. You can make a radio wave into a light wave. You can do all that. So that part I don't challenge. I'm not sure how in the vastness of space, ether or not, you could dial those antennae to find that specific wave. This is where like I go, this can't possibly be real. How could you do that? But then on the other hand, I have to be honest and tell you, I'm not really sure how the appliances in my kitchen work. So who am I to say that this is impossible? Right?
Well, every time you keep on saying Ernetti, I keep on thinking Emmett Brown and flux capacitor. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
To think about all of those things. Can I talk about the picture for a second?
Yes.
Tell me again, how is this picture presented initially? I'm not talking about the one they found in the gift shop, but how was this presented?
Father Ernetti told Father Bruna that although the Chronovisor was mostly a device for watching, not a recording device, they were able to film the way that you could right now take your camera and roll video on something on your TV.
Right.
You can picture
Right.
that, right?
Sure.
They were able to record this set of events around the Last Supper and the resurrection and all of that. So that photograph that appeared in La Dominica del Corriere was a screen grab from this alleged Chronovisor recording.
Okay.
There are a couple of things in the story, and they are deliberate contradictions, and I left them in there so that we could talk about them. The first contradiction happens right here. Father Bruna asked Father Ernetti, were you able to witness the crucifixion? And Father Ernetti said, no, because there were so many crucifixions. Remember?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And yet the screen grab of the alleged recording of the Last Supper, the magazine printed that image as Christ on the cross. Now, it's very possible that the magazine made the mistake saying that this is Christ on the cross and not at the Last Supper. It wasn't Father Ernetti who said that was Christ on the cross. It was, let me say it again because it's so fun, La Dominica del Corriere. They said that.
So the photograph was a still that was taken from this movie that was allegedly taken of this event through this Chronovision machine.
Chronovisor.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
So the letter that the Giornale de Misteria received with a copy of that same photograph, a person, just a random citizen, happened to pay a visit to this sanctuary and saw this photograph in the gift shop. And he had seen the picture in La Domenica del Corriere of Jesus on the cross from the Chronovisor, which let me just point out to you that when this magazine article dropped in the early 1970s, it was not treated as get a load of this craziness. It was reported as like fact. Mm-hmm. Just so we're all clear about that. So De Silva, who found the photograph in the gift shop, sent this letter off and said, I think they're lying because this photograph is a famous Spanish engraving, woodcut. Mm. So that's a contradiction, right? Mm-hmm. This alleged image of Christ on the cross was not. I mean, that was clearly faked. And Ernetti never really offered any explanation as to that. And the reason for Ernetti not explaining was what? The Vatican had silenced him. Mm-hmm. This is, we're going to have another episode coming up in a while about another a very new baby conspiracy theory that just got birthed. But here's the thing about a conspiracy theory. You have to anchor it in truth in as many ways as you can, because that makes it compelling and believable. Mm-hmm. So the Chronovisor story has so many anchors in reality that you can point to. Now, the problem with those anchors is that sometimes you stumble across the contradiction, which happened a couple of times in this story. And how do we explain those contradictions? A conspiracy theory not only needs to be anchored in truth, it needs to offer an explanation to account for its own secrecy. Mm-hmm. And we have that here in the Vatican silencing Father Ernetti. So all the ingredients are in play. But the other thing that is true of the Chronovisor story, as is true for all the best conspiracy theories, so you've got the anchor points in reality, you have the built-in explanation of why we can't tell you more, right? Mm-hmm. You have all of that going on. But then you have the heart and soul of this is based on something that people desperately crave, and that's proof that there's something beyond this world. Mm-hmm. It's a perfect conspiracy theory in that way, I think.
So let's go back to I'm sorry, go back to Dr. Emmett Brown and Back to the Future. Dr. Emmett Brown would put in a date, and that's how they would take us there. you had touched on this before. So he's saying, look, it was hard because there were a lot of crucifixions back then. There were a lot of crucifixions and lots of crowns of thorns, and I believe that. Also, I know that at some point along the line, in art museums and all kinds of things, I have seen images of Jesus carrying a cross, but just the one bar. I know that I've seen that somewhere in some painting or something. So that wasn't terribly surprising to me. And in a lot of ways, I guess it makes more sense that they would put the whole thing together once they got up there, the two parts of the cross, right?
Again, you look at you pointing out one of the anchors to the truth that makes this compelling, because you're so right. We have seen those images with just the horizontal bar. Now, in modern contemporary pop culture, you see the whole cross. Unless you're a money-grubbing televangelist, in which case it's the whole cross, but there are little wheels on the bottom one. You've seen that, right? That's hysterical to me.
And it's also not terribly surprising. The man, Simon, who they got to help him carry the cross, it's not terribly surprising that he was forced to do it. That doesn't surprise me in the least.
What was interesting, and this is one of those where how much in the theological weeds do we want to go? Because all of us, and we're Catholic school kids, all of us were taught that Simon nobly and out of love and pure faith and service offered himself to Christ. But what Father Ernetti is saying, that when they witnessed the true events, which again, I have to point out to you, how did you witness the true events of Simon of Cyrene, since you told Father Bruna that you couldn't get to the crucifixion because there were so damn many crucifixions?
Well, that's the other thing.
See the contradiction?
And the contradiction, and you touched on this before, the contradiction of we don't know, we can't put it in the flux capacitor, the date that we want to go to exactly, but we do know exactly when the Last Supper is.
So they were, so he claims, we were able to get there. And the thing about one of the problems with time travel to the past that is like a physical problem, a reality-based problem is that while the past might be quote unquote fixed, like I know exactly where to find April 1st, 1920, for example. The earth and everything is in constant movement. So in order to travel back to the past, you not only need to go to the time, you need to go to the place, because you're not April 1st, 1950 isn't in the same physical location as it was on April 1st, 1950. Is that confusing?
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, I understand that.
So even with the flux capacitor and the chronovisor,
right.
Like how are we accomplishing that? This is one of those where like there's enough to it where you go, I don't know, man, there's something here. But there are enough like logical contradictions to where you go, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's a big old lie. And I come down to Father Ernetti on his deathbed saying we wanted it to work. And I am as intrigued by the idea of Pellegrino Ernetti, Enrico Fermi, and Werner von Braun trying to make a time machine as I am by any idea that they succeeded. Like what a crazy scenario that is. What do you think?
Well, if there was anybody that could do it back then, if you wanted to get the great minds together, those are some of the guys that you would certainly put together. I know one of the problems is we're not even exactly sure what date Christ was born. We want to say it was, the
December 25th,
the year zero, or whatever you want to say.
No.
We don't even know exactly when the date was that he was born. And so at the same time, we can't even know exactly what date that he died. I mean, we can approximately know how old he was at that point. I can't remember what that age was. Was it 28, 38?
It's young.
I can't remember. It was young. It was really young.
It's young.
I know because a friend of mine used to say, you know, Jesus died at this date. You're older than that now. What have you accomplished?
Yeah. Let's get focused.
You know. But I think also something that happened on the day that he died that might be a marker in some way historically is there's a belief that there was an earthquake that day at that time.
But the closest that we could come to confirming that would be anecdotal accounts, and humans are weird the way we go, but that's what Luke says in the Gospels, so it's the gospel truth. Mm-hmm. And then we find a parchment from Babylonia and we go, well, they were a bunch of superstitious fools. So like we're very choosy about which historical and anecdotal accounts we decide are accurate. There were so many things in this story that I imagine are very triggering for some people. The idea that the Vatican is sitting on proof that Christ was married and a father, that's some stuff a lot of folks are not interested in consuming.
Well, the thing is, that doesn't bother me. And the reason that it doesn't bother me is, does that diminish what he did? Does it diminish his message? Does it diminish what he accomplished? Does it diminish the kind of effect he's had on so many people through the course of time? I would say no. But
you know how people can become very rigid and very kind of like doctrinaire. That is not what I was taught. That is not true. That is heresy.
Any new information, they feel threatened by that. They feel like, well, what I believe is threatening. Therefore, whatever information you're bringing me is wrong. Listen, I have no problem at all believing that Jesus lived and walked the earth and did all these things. I have no problem with any of that whatsoever. And I think that, faith is about, being able to believe in something and not seeing proof. But to my mind, I think there is proof. I think there's a lot of proof that you see around you every day if you're open, if you are willing to be open to it, So that to me, there's two things that are happening here. There's the spiritual part of this, and there's the historical part of this, and
the science
and
angle
there are people,
too.
There are, and the science, yes, and so there are people who are scholars at this stuff, and we're just I'm sitting here goofing around with a little incidental information that I have, where I'm sure that scholars could sit down and we could probably do an entire podcast. I don't mean an episode, an entire podcast about how all of those three things come together in this story.
No, I agree. And I know that I must have, I didn't realize until pretty recently that I must have such a masochistic kink, because I sit down and I go, you know what, girl? You really comprehend almost nothing about the intensity of this level of science. See if you can't figure it out and explain it, because it is really challenging to like make the theory of the conservation of energy to make it not sound like gobbledygook in the context of the chronovisor.
Right.
If you'd have told me the amount of time we'd spend in the world of physics on this podcast, but it turns out because physics and the quantum subatomic world, that is reality, y'all. We are just atoms ricocheting around, organizing reality as we go. And with our thoughts, we make the world. But y'all ain't ready for that conversation, so we'll get back to the Vatican. The thing about Father Ernetti that has really haunted me with this is that I think he absolutely believed. Absolutely believed. And he believed it with such conviction and passion that he damn near willed it into truth. Didn't get there all the way, maybe.
So you think that he wanted it to be true so much that he believed it into his own reality? Is that what you're saying?
I think he wanted it to be true so much that he never gave up on the idea that it could be true. Because here's what you have to remember about Pellegrino Ernetti. This man most people, if they've ever heard of him, and the people that would have heard of him are people in the music world, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is one of the world's foremost authorities on Gregorian chant. This was not a kook. This was not some priest that they kept moving further and further out into the countryside to keep him away from people. He was a musicologist. He became a physicist. He was a deeply, deeply devout man. He entered the monastery as a boy and then was ordained as a priest. This was an educated, sophisticated, deep thinker who was widely known and respected in both the worlds of music and science. He was very highly placed in the Catholic Church. I mean, Max will tell you, your average priest doesn't have too many meetings with the Pope.
No.
Does he?
Mm-mm.
You know? So this is not a crackpot. This is not someone who is unworthy of even being entertained as a serious person. This is a serious person. But I can certainly understand wanting something to be true so desperately that you look up one day and your life has gone by in your pursuit of that. Some of us want things to be true that are real close to home. Like you want to believe that your abusive parent or partner can be better.
Mm-hmm.
You want to believe that your dad can get sober. You want to believe that you can heal and be better, right?
Right.
And then sometimes we extend it out. I know people that believe in their absolute heart that they are one sentence away from being famous best-selling authors, and they might be right. Musicians, actors, isn't this incredible, powerful self-belief, this desire to make a dream come true? Isn't that one of the things that makes us human?
Yeah, it is.
This is Father Ernetti. He could have had an illustrious career, never leaving the world of music. He was a renowned musicologist. But that chance encounter with Father Gemelli in Milan changed everything for him. Now, what did Gemelli pick up on that tape recorder? Anybody with basic cable has seen a gazillion ghost hunting shows where, we're picking up signals from the spirit world or the beyond. But it was this man's voice, clear as day, calling Gemelli by his childhood nickname. Now, you can say, well, they're both liars who want attention. I guess you could say that. I mean, you can. It's a free country. You can say it. But does that feel true to you? That these two priests, both intellectuals, Krebs, one of them founded the university in Milan. These two towering intellects who have both taken holy orders. You think they're just making crap up for funsies?
What would be the possible benefit of doing such a thing?
Especially in an era when there's no social media. It wasn't like the two of them decided to have a TikTok together and monetize it. And do you know what I mean?
No, you're right.
We're in the 1950s, folks. There's no way for these two towering intellects, holy men, priests, to cook up a scheme to make money off of their wacky notion. And Gemelli was so traumatized by these events that he backed away completely and never resumed it. So what do you make of that?
Well, I think, it's possible that they discovered something. And sometimes if you discover something that's so powerful, you're like, I don't want any part of that. For instance, the idea of exorcisms, the idea of can there be possessions? Can people have possessions? I think what passed for possessions in the time that a lot of Bible stories were written were people that had any one of a number of things like Tourette's,
epilepsy,
any one of a number of things that we now know what they are. But do I believe that there are demonic possessions? I do. There have been cases.
And Father Ernetti is one of the church's most famous is maybe not the right word to use here, but the most well-known, renowned exorcists of his day. Now, his fellow priests did whisper that perhaps he was too enthusiastic about finding demons. Remember, they accused him of mistaking medical maladies for possession.
Right.
Not in every case, but in some.
Right.
But if you're an exorcist and the only tool you have is casting out the devil, every problem looks like a demon. And that was kind of what they were suggesting about Father Ernetti.
I see that.
Was he a little unhinged? Was he a little loopy? Was he a little dramatic? Was he completely insane? Hard to say. But I think that you just can't dismiss him out of hand as a hoaxer without at least looking at like the scope of everything he did and everything he claimed. And again, like all good conspiracy theories, we need those points that touch reality. We need a built-in reason for why the truth can't come out. We have that. The Vatican silenced him.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also need another explanation for why can't we have it now? And the Vatican's explanation was, and this is true, and it'll remind you of the movie Minority Report, you can't have a device that strips every human being of their privacy.
Mm.
You just can't. Because in the Akashic record, and we'll do we'll do an episode coming up here eventually. Let me make a note. We'll do an episode on the Akashic record. How much did you know about that?
I didn't know anything about it.
Okay, good. Because, you're my favorite person to entertain. So we'll do an episode on the Akashic record and Madame Blavatsky and the Theosophists and stuff. But in the Akashic record, Max, the Akashic record is kind of like physics and relativity and the truth about time. There's no past, present, and future. Everything is happening all at once. Everything, everywhere, all the time. Past, present, future. Time is not only a circle, it's a tangled up knot of a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And everything, you are right now in this moment, you are everything you have ever been and will be. That's kind of the mind-blowing, trippy part of quantum physics and quantum mechanics. So in the world of the Akashic record, guess what the Akashic record knows? Everything, past, present, future. Every thought, deed, intention of you, a human, every living thing, including non-human intelligent entities that may be elsewhere. So the tricky bit with the Akashic record is it knows the future as well as the past. And that is kind of something to wrestle with, especially if you're Dr. Ernetti and you're building a machine. But again, the conspiracy theory of the Chronovisor accounts for that by pointing out to you that in the legitimate science of time travel, you really can't go backward. You can only watch and observe. You can only travel forward. And if the Akashic record is true, do you know what that means? That means future Max, we already know.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's determined. Now, physics will step in and go, well, hold up there, little girl, just a second. Actually, we don't already know future Max because in every moment, every decision that Max makes, he collapses a waveform. So right now, Max, for future Max, all things are possible. Anything is possible. You could get up right now and throw yourself through a window or eat a hot dog or burst into flames or fall asleep or drop dead. It's when you make the choice, that is what collapses all those other possible waveforms and shapes the future path for you.
Right.
So you stand up right now and you decide, I'm not going through the window. I'm going to have the hot dog. And all the events associated with you throwing yourself through a window, all those waveforms collapse. And now we're in this timeline where Max is having a hot dog.
Mm-hmm.
And in every instant, every moment, every thought, every decision, everything, you're creating and collapsing waveforms. That's the gist, basically, of the quantum side of this. And the Akashic record fits very neatly into that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because I can access your Akashic record, and you've already made all your past decisions, but in every moment, you're creating the record for me to read for future Max, if that makes sense. I cannot believe that I am not high as balls right now, because this feels like the kind of conversation you would have if you were high, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. So are you trying to tell me?
And keep in mind that my understanding of this stuff is the same understanding a mouse has about a couch. It just sees it. It has no idea what the hell's really going on. Like, I really don't have any... My mind melts down when I try to think about it. But in the context of this story and Father Ernetti, the whole thing exists within the framework of possibility and legitimate science, doesn't it?
It does.
It's a gorgeous conspiracy theory.
Yeah. But the idea that it's easier to go forward than backward makes sense, really does.
Well, there's a series of time travel books that I absolutely love. The author is Jody. Let me think about it. It's they're British and it's time travel, and there's like this whole government agency that studies the past. They go back as observers. They don't go back to manipulate the timeline because, of course, that would create paradoxes, right?
Right.
They go back and they're historians. It's so British. They're time traveling historians, and they go back in time and they witness things. They witness the marriage of Henry VIII and one of his wives, or they witness the battle at Waterloo and Washington crossing the Delaware, whatever, right?
Right.
But of course, because, they're humans and these are funny books, something always goes wrong and they end up messing with the timeline, and then history has to fix herself, and they're hysterical and you would really love them. But that notion of, can we travel through time and just watch is pretty entrenched, because when you think about time travel, that's kind of all you could do, right? Mm-hmm. It's happened. It's over.
Yeah.
And it's not good for your brain if you have anxiety, or if you have a hamster that runs on a wheel inside your head, to think too much about the knotted up circle of time where it's all happening.
My brother would always say this to me. He would always say this to me. It's all we put all these. It's all happening all at once, and I just would go, "Are we having dessert?" Or
I want a story like this to be true, just because how cool would that be?
Very.
How cool would that be? And let's say this story is true. I do agree with the Vatican. I do agree with Pope Pius XII, who said, this is dangerous. This cannot exist. For the good of humanity, this must be dismantled and concealed and forgotten. I mean, if that doesn't sound like a Dan Brown book or a National Treasure movie, what does?
Yeah. Speaking of which, there's another National Treasure movie coming out.
I can't wait. The people of Earth need it.
Yes.
So whether or not this is true, we can at least all sit back and admire how beautifully it's been built. Mm-hmm. It is a beautifully built story that is a conspiracy theory or a hoax or whatever word you want to use. It's gorgeous because it just uses all the ingredients. And it makes us think about like what it would feel like to have proof of everything, proof of Jesus, and proof of the resurrection, and proof that there's more beyond this. We could go back and we could get proof of other things. Think about, like, right off the top of your head, what's an event that you wish you could watch? Like, I have a lot of questions about the Sphinx, Max. I'd like to know a little bit more about the Sphinx.
Well, I'd
like to go back and watch that.
I'd like to know that. And I don't. The thing is, I don't know that let's just say I could witness the crucifixion of Christ. Would that, I already believe that happened. I don't need to see that. The thing that's most important to me was, what was his life about and what was he doing? Do you see what I mean?
That's because you're not a time traveling historian. The time traveling historians, they don't bring their own
I see what you're saying.
Here's what they say. They say, this is an opportunity to witness a true event in it unfold in front of us and to learn more. They're not questioning, did Jesus exist? They just want to know more about everything that happened. And because these were priests and, intellectuals, look at what Father Ernetti did with what he allegedly witnessed on the Chronovisor. He went back and he compared it to the changes in the scripture in the medieval monasteries. Mm-hmm. And he challenged that. He was like, you changed history to tell a better story and you shouldn't have done that. So interesting, right? That he would do that.
But people do that all the time.
Yeah. We think of history as this dry, dusty, dead thing that lives in a book, when history, like everything else, is constantly shifting and evolving and being altered. And if history really was a dead, lifeless thing, why would we need to go back and censor it? Like, if history is dead and lifeless, why are they removing signs at national parks that talk about slavery, for example? If history is so dull and pointless and doesn't matter, then why are we always in such an all-fired hurry to change it and rewrite it to suit the current narrative? History is powerful and alive. And these were academics. I mean, you have to think about that. They had different motivations for wanting to go back and watch these things than you or I might. Like, I'd like to see the pyramids get built.
I would be fascinated to know about that.
I wouldn't mind finding myself sitting in front of a TV watching what really happened at Dealey Plaza when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Think about all of the things that you're curious about that are still kind of unresolved. Wouldn't you like to see it?
Yeah.
And then silly things that aren't historically significant, but I'd like to sit in front of the screen and watch them work on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
You know? And building the Golden Gate Bridge. And man, would I be interested in being on the launch pad the day that the Apollo mission took off to bring those astronauts to the moon. It would be thrilling and amazing. But again, you know, if you believe this story and you believe Pope Pius XII, it is also the most dangerous thing that you could have. Not the 12th. I'm sorry. I get my Roman number, the 7th. I get my Roman V as a 5. I kept saying, I apologize.
It's a 12th. It's all right.
Yeah, it's whatever. Listen, we get things wrong all the time around here. But if you're going to yell at me for getting my Roman numerals wrong while also believing a time travel TV machine, I don't know. Apologies. I kept saying the 12th and I should have said the 7th. But anyway, yeah. So what do you believe, Max? At the end of the day, do you believe Father Ernetti?
No.
What do you believe is in the apostolic archives?
I believe that there was a machine where they tried to do it, but I don't believe that it happened. And the proof of the hoax is that picture. I mean, that to me, the idea that now, if that picture had never appeared and they said they did it, but the fact that they went, we have to do this picture. And the fact that he did that and perpetuated a hoax with that.
A true tinfoil hat believer would say to you, yeah, but Max, how do you know that the magazine didn't do that to undermine the credibility of the story because the Vatican wanted this silenced? Maybe the Vatican was behind that photograph.
Sharing.
Do you see see how these conspiracy theories work? They're gorgeous.
It's how politics does now.
Yeah.
You know.
They leave you a million doors. You will never find yourself trapped in a locked room in a well-done conspiracy theory. There's always another door to go through.
My feeling is that this was here's the thing. I don't believe that this happened. I believe he believed it happened and perhaps was deluded by that. And the other guy that was with him, I think at some point along the line, he's deluded. And that's why
Father Bruna, yeah.
Why he dropped out.
Father Bruna believed Ernetti for Ernetti's whole life, but Bruna wrote a book and he was not afraid to question and be critical. It's just one of those great little stories that's perfect in every way. And the fact that the proof is in the Vatican's archives means we'll never get proof. Because we're never going to get down there. We're never going to know.
Can I just tell you, I so want this to be true. I want this to be so true. But
I do too.
I think there's a part of me that is like,
Every time I hit a fresh contradiction, I was like, oh. And I can't, just because I want something to be true, I can't I can't fudge it. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Because that wouldn't be right either.
But
and you know, I believe in
the true part of this is this all did indeed. The story of this all did indeed happen. This was
Yeah. Now on the next True Weird Stuff, there's nothing woo woo about the next episode of True Weird Stuff. I'm sorry. I think time machines that let you watch The Last Supper, that's a little woo-woo, right?
It is.
this next one, for those of you that like things that are, just facts, Jack, this next True Weird Stuff episode, we're going to take a look at why all these generations of American public school students were made to learn square dancing in school. And the reason for it is just delicious. It involves an incredibly wealthy, successful industrialist who is revered even today as one of the greatest businessmen that America has ever produced. And this man, he was a great businessman. And we have his genius to thank for so many things. But he was also a raging, foaming at the mouth racist bigot. And he decided that the only way to save America was to access America's youth and get them real caught up in wholesome white people culture. And in his mind, want nothing more wholesome, more white people than square dancing. And that's all I'm going to tell you, because it's going to be so much fun, especially if you were one of those kids who was required to bow to your partner and do-si-do in the school gym. You're going to eat this up. That's on the next True Weird Stuff. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
And if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, hit the plus button in the top right corner, and now it helps an independent podcast like ours to get discovered. And we really appreciate it if you subscribe, rate, and review True Weird Stuff.
Hit our website, trueweirdstuff.com, for show notes and photos and videos when we have it, and bonus content. Everything True Weird is waiting for you at trueweirdstuff.com.
And follow True Weird Stuff on Instagram.
True Weird Stuff is a Now Media production. Our executive producer is Anthony Garcia. The show is written and hosted by me, Sherry Lynch, along with my deeply weird director, Max Sweeten. Our equally odd producer is Carrie Bowser. Additional production by the mysterious Stephen Call. Our digital witch and social media cult leader is Heather Furr. Original graphics by Kevin Nash. Original artworks by Olivia Axlin. True Weird original music composed and performed by Jack Griffin and Zane Nash.
Copyright 2026, Now Media.
All rights reserved, all wrongs remembered.